A lantern-lit night in Hanyang. Hey guys, tonight we're going to walk beneath strange stars. But don't worry, the sky is familiar, just slightly different. You're in a world where the Korean kingdoms, centuries ago, chose not only to look to the heavens for wisdom, but to share what they found far beyond their borders. Tonight, you'll walk slowly through cities lit by starlight and silk lanterns. You'll hear foreign names whispered in familiar accents. See celestial globes with characters both Hangul and Latin, and drift between past and possibility. It's a gentle history, a soft dream of what might have been. Now, just a small reminder. You might not survive if this really happened. Long desert crossings, unfamiliar illnesses, strange tongues, ancient suspicions. This isn't your world, not entirely. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm always grateful to wander history with you. And hey, leave a comment with where you're watching from and your local time. I read every one. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are walking along a narrow stone street in Hanyang, the capital of the Joseon dynasty. The year is 1423, but not the one you know. This is a different version of the past. One where something small but pivotal has already shifted. There's something alive in the night air. Paper lanterns float gently from curved eaves. Shadows stretch across whitewashed walls. You hear sandals scraping, a mother calling to her child. The distant clink of tools on brass. You pass a young boy chasing a spinning top that hums faintly, not made of wood, but polished bronze etched with stars. It's an astronomical toy, gifted by a local artisan whose designs were once reserved only for the Royal Shingguan Observatory. Overhead, stars pierce the darkness like pinholes in silk. Someone nearby is playing a two-string hegium, the notes warble. Delicate and melancholic, you round a corner and step into a courtyard filled with quiet activity. Here, scholars in deep blue robes kneel over long scrolls and delicate paper instruments. They murmur in low tones, comparing measurements. Above them stands a great bronze gnomon, a shadow-casting sundial, while beside it rests a water clock softly dripping, counting time in droplets. One man, older, with a beard down to his chest and a feathered black hat, looks up at you and smiles. "Come," he says softly, "you are just in time." He shows you a star map, not the ones we know. This one's spiral is offset, centered on different stars. It includes faint comets and planetary paths, carefully drawn based on nightly observations from the Royal Observatory atop Mount Namsan. "This," he whispers, "will cross the desert." You glance to the side, and see that crates are being packed, scrolls, tools, and something strange, a folding star chart printed on mulberry bark paper. And in the center of it all is a spherical object made of polished wood and string, marked with both Korean and Arabic numerals. It's a celestial globe, not just to be studied here, but sent out, carried west. That's the shift. That's what's different. In this world, under a forward-thinking king and a curious court, Korea has decided not just to study the skies, but to share their findings. A scholarly expedition is being prepared, not to claim lands or gold, but to share ideas, to see what others see in the stars. You notice a woman standing silently at the edge of the courtyard. She's younger than the others, dressed plainly, but her fingers move swiftly as she folds instruments into linen wraps. You later learn she's a former palace maid turned stargazer, an unlikely path in any version of history. But in this one, small eccentricities are tolerated if they lead to discovery. And the more you look, the more you realize, this isn't a court driven by conquest or fear. It's a place humming with gentle ambition, the kind that sees sharing not as surrender, but as strength. A warm breeze carries the scent of ink and lacquer. You look up, and realize that above the courtyard is an opening in the roof. A perfect square of night sky, framed like a scroll, a nod to the old Confucian adage, "Study the heavens, to govern the earth." Nearby, a child asks his father a question. "Do people in the West see the same stars?" The father hesitates. "Some, yes," he replies softly, "but they may call them different names." And so begins the journey. You step into a candlelit hall where the final preparations are being made. The room is filled with scrolls wrapped in blue silk, tools fitted into narrow drawers, and a map drawn not on paper, but on woven silk, flexible enough to survive the desert winds. You notice a box being sealed with wax. It contains a gift, a jade inlay armillary sphere, delicate and precise. Engraved on its base are 4 characters, Dongbangqianmun, Eastern Sky Knowledge. Before you leave the hall, the old scholar returns. He places a small packet in your palm, a charm made of dried mugwort and rice paper. For safe passage, he says with a wink, even the stars cannot protect a fool who forgets to eat. Outside, the lanterns flicker in the soft wind, and somewhere, hidden among the rooftops, a small observatory bell chimes midnight. It's time. You follow the others down toward the Han River. A small boat waits at the dock, its bow marked with the seal of Xinguan, the Royal Bureau of Astronomy. Above you, Orion hangs low in the sky, his belt crooked, almost smirking. He will follow you westward. Or perhaps, in this version of the world, you will follow him. You are seated in a wooden cart, its wheels padded with thick cloth to silence their rumble across the road. Around you, crates shift gently with each turn, their contents softly knocking, brass rings, paper scrolls, wrapped bundles of dried ink sticks. You lean back against a sack of mulberry bark paper and feel its strange springiness beneath your shoulder blades. The envoy is modest. No banners, no guards in gleaming armor. Just 6 wagons, a dozen riders, and a few quiet minds. This isn't a royal mission in the traditional sense. It's quieter, more personal, more uncertain. The morning air is wrapped in fog as you pass through the city gates. Hanyang slowly disappears behind you, roofs vanishing into clouds, only their curved corners still reaching upward like brushstrokes against the sky. You are heading west, beyond the Yellow Sea, beyond the westernmost counties of the Ming Empire. Your path will follow a patchwork of old Silk Road routes, weaving through mountain passes, desert outposts, and lost cities reborn as waystations for knowledge. On the first day, your only companions are the wind and the call of geese overhead. The other members of the expedition, mostly court scholars, a few astronomer monks, and one unusually silent artist, ride in near silence. One hums a melody, tapping lightly on a jade-handled compass. That evening, you rest in a wooden inn on the edge of a small farming village. The food is warm but plain, barley porridge, salted turnip greens, and slices of dried persimmon. You chew slowly, your thoughts still caught on the star maps resting in the wagon outside. As the sun sets, one of the scholars, the youngest of the group, barely past 20, pulls out a small object and begins turning it slowly under the flickering lantern light. It's a Hansing, a miniature celestial globe, Korean in origin, but modified to display the ecliptic path taught by Persian astronomers centuries earlier. Did you know, he whispers, without looking up, that we call Altair the Flying One? But in Persia, they named it the Eagle Star. You nod, eyes half closed. Different birds. You murmur. Same direction. He replies, smiling. That night, you sleep beneath wooden rafters and dream of stars that change names as they move west. Days pass. You journey through rice paddies, across frost-laced hills, and into thick forest paths where deer cross silently ahead of you. The nights are filled with starlight, always examined, always whispered about. At one stop near the border of Ming territory, a Chinese merchant joins your caravan. He wears layered silks dyed in pale blue and gold, and carries a bundle of Arabic manuscripts translated into Chinese centuries ago by travelers through Samarkand. He recognizes the armillary sphere you're helping unload from one of the crates and chuckles softly. We called those sky cages once, he says. They trap time and release it in circles. You nod politely, unsure whether it's praise or warning. As you cross into Mongol-controlled trade lands, the terrain opens up. The grasslands stretch in every direction like green silk pulled taut. And here, something peculiar begins to happen. You stop more frequently. Small camps appear along the roads, filled with a curious mix of people, Uyghur traders, Central Asian horsemen, a wandering Sufi poet who recites verses about stars and camel hooves. At each camp, someone asks about your maps. One elder holds a star chart sideways, tilts his head, and says, "Ah, you follow the camel's spine. We follow the dragon's breath." Some historians today argue whether knowledge really moved that easily across cultures, whether ideas like lunar tables or sun shadows could leap across languages without distortion. Others insist that poetry made the best vehicle for such things, where equations failed. Metaphors carried meaning like incense on air. That night, you sit beside a campfire under a sky so clear it feels unreal. The fire crackles. A sheep bleats somewhere in the dark. Someone passes you a cup of fermented mare's milk, arid, sour but oddly refreshing. A child points at the sky and asks what the bright star is. The artist in your group answers softly, Venus. But we call her the morning daughter, says a Mongol woman nearby. The child repeats the name in both tongues. Then claps. You smile. Somewhere in your pack is a chart where Venus is drawn with both names now. A quiet kind of diplomacy, not of treaties, but of terminology. You lie back on the cold earth. The sky above is impossibly wide. A flock of birds passes overhead in silence. The caravan leader says you'll reach the Persian trading cities within a fortnight. And after that, further west than any Korean scholar has officially gone. But tonight, here on this windswept plain, it feels like the stars themselves are following you. Or maybe, just maybe, they're guiding. The observatory on the steppe. The steppe stretches around you like an endless whisper, tall grass swaying in rhythm with the wind. The occasional herd of goats wandering in and out of sight. You've left behind the more familiar corners of East Asia now. The Ming border faded days ago. Gone are the tiled roofs and paper lanterns. In their place, yurts, wide skies, and the hum of a different kind of silence. You're walking now, letting the cart roll ahead. The air feels cleaner here. Sharper, smelling faintly of dry sagebrush and wind-blown ash. You pass a line of stones half buried in the soil, marked with carvings you don't recognize. A scholar beside you mutters, Turkic Tamga, family crests, or star signs. Maybe. The path leads to a gathering of yurts shaped like low hills. Their white canvas glowing faintly under the afternoon sun. This is not just a camp, it's a place of learning. An observatory without walls. Here on the steppe, knowledge is passed through stories. Through tools handed from hand to hand. Through long, firelit nights of stargazing. You're told this place has no formal name. But the locals call it, the Quiet Rain. Because every season, people come here in circles, horsemen, mystics, astronomers, and traders, to exchange the one thing that costs nothing, ideas. That evening, you join one of those circles. You're seated cross-legged around a low fire. Across from you sits a man in deep red robes. His face weathered, eyes soft. A Persian scholar who came east chasing a comet's trail 10 years ago. Beside him, a Chinese stargazer holds a worn abacus and a tin box filled with astrolabe pieces. Someone passes around fermented goat cheese and flatbread. Another offers dried apricots and salted almonds. As you eat, the conversation drifts, slowly, deliberately, from food, to stories, to the stars. The elder speaks first, holding up a curved shard of bronze etched with markings. This, he says, was once part of an Islamic astrolabe, Samarra. Maybe, or Baghdad. I found it buried in a merchant's yard. It shows a version of the sky where Polaris isn't the center. But the servant, a Korean monk nearby, replies calmly. In Hanyang, we align our instruments with the North Star. But only as a fixed point, not a ruler. Someone laughs gently. So in the West, it leads. In the East, it listens. You don't know who said it. But it lingers. A real historical fact, the Islamic world, especially in places like Persia and Baghdad, preserved and advanced astronomy long after many parts of Europe had forgotten it. They refined the astrolabe, invented complex planetary models, and created observatories that charted the skies with remarkable precision. And now, here on the steppe, in this alternate strand of time, that knowledge meets its counterpart from Joseon. Quietly, without fanfare, without colonization, just ink, bronze, and breath. The Korean instruments are passed around. In Engbu Ilgu, a hemispherical sundial, draws gasps. One of the Persian observers tilts it toward the firelight and murmurs. It tells time with a bowl of shadow. A Chinese traveler nods. Better than many of ours. Smaller, simple. Then, a rare moment of levity. The young Korean scholar, the one who showed you the Hansine back in the village, begins sketching new designs into the dirt. Hybrid tools, Korean timekeeping with Persian elegance. Instruments that could work in Venice. Or Lisbon, maybe even further. You ask him what he would call it. He thinks. Something soft. Like, sky echo. No one laughs. They all nod. Slowly. Some historians still argue whether knowledge really flowed evenly across the Silk Road. Whether East met West in meaningful dialogue. Or if most exchanges were one-sided. Bound by trade and survival. But here, in this imagined stillness, the conversation feels mutual. A give and take that doesn't need translators. Just time. Later that night, you walk away from the fire. Alone. The stars are so thick above you. They cast shadows. You see Vega near the zenith. And Mars glowing rust red at the horizon. A shooting star cuts across Cassiopeia like a whispered thought. You pull your robes tighter and lie down on the cold grass. Far away, someone is softly plucking a stringed instrument, maybe a dombra. Or a hegium. You can't tell. The melody bends like the wind. You feel the world tilting beneath you. Or maybe it's just your imagination. But in this quiet place between empires, between alphabets and calendars and gods, you can almost believe that ideas are the only true borders worth crossing. Crossing into a curious Persia. You awaken to sunlight filtering through stretched canvas and the soft rustle of morning winds tugging at tent ropes. The steppe is behind you now. The grasslands gave way to stone paths and foothills. And now you stand on the edge of something even older, an empire woven from oasis towns. Ancient caravanserais, and tiled domes that seem to float on heat haze. You've entered Persia. The caravan moves slowly through a rocky valley threaded with almond trees. Their leaves shimmering silver in the breeze. You pause at a narrow pass guarded not by soldiers, but by statues of lions, eroded almost smooth by time. A local guide, speaking softly in both Persian and broken Korean, tells you these lands once sheltered Darius the Great. His roads still lie beneath your wheels. In the distance, the skyline of a city rises like a dream, turquoise domes, slender minarets, and the unmistakable outline of a zig, a large Islamic astronomical observatory. Your first stop is Yazd, a city known for its windcatchers, its labyrinthine alleys, and its uncanny sense of stillness. It feels halfway between earth and sky. You're led to a quiet courtyard shaded by cypress trees. At its center, a reflecting pool shaped like a crescent moon. Around it, Persian astronomers recline on cushions with scrolls in hand and sweet mint tea on silver trays. They've heard of your journey. They've been expecting you. One man, draped in flowing cream robes, smiles and gestures to a seat beside him. We thought the East studied stars in silence, he says, but you come walking with them in your hands. He's referring to the crates behind you. Of course, scrolls written in Hangul and classical Chinese. Tools made of lacquered wood. And a model of the moon's orbit designed by Zhang Yung-sil himself. You gently unroll one of the star charts. A ripple of quiet awe spreads through the group. Someone taps gently on the parchment with a calloused finger. Your moon phases are near perfect. Our zig has been off by a degree. And thus, the comparison begins. Over the next few days, you join these astronomers in long, relaxed sessions beneath grapevine-covered pergolas. They compare lunar cycles, sunspot sketches, shadow length tables, and weather records going back centuries. Here's one of those fascinating historical truths. Persian astronomers were among the first to identify the precession of the equinoxes, a subtle drift in the Earth's axial rotation over millennia. Their zig tables were so precise. Some medieval European scholars based their own calendars on them. Now, in this alternate thread of time, Korean scholars contribute new corrections. Using shadow boards, they've tracked a slight wobble in lunar position during the midsummer solstice. A friendly debate begins. The youngest Persian scholar suggests the difference is due to elevation. A Korean monk insists it's the alignment of their tools. A third scholar, an older woman with silver in her braid, proposes a third option. Perhaps the moon is simply trying to surprise us. Laughter follows. A chess game is quietly started. The older woman wins with 3 moves no one saw coming. You wander alone that evening through Yazd's silent streets, your fingers brushing the warm brick walls. Pigeons flutter from rooftops. In a shop window, you spot an astrolabe unlike any you've seen, round like others, but framed with floral Korean motifs and geometric Persian patterns. A hybrid. Recent. Someone is already creating fusions. This is the quiet shift. A subtle remix of ideas. Nothing loud, nothing forceful, but persistent. Some scholars in your own time argue that cultural sharing only happened when war forced it. That silk traveled west because empires pushed it there. That printing spread because Mongols carried it like arrows. But here, in this woven tapestry of a moment, the movement feels gentler, purposeful, slow, like honey melting in sun-warmed clay. Back at the observatory, you are shown a room with star maps painted directly onto domed ceilings. The stars shimmer gold against indigo plaster. Their names inscribed in Persian script: Sahel, Aljanab, Fomalhaut. You sit for a while beneath that ceiling, eyes tracing constellations you know by different names. Beside you, the quiet artist from your caravan sketches the ceiling with soft charcoal strokes. You watch as they blend East Asian clouds into the Persian sky. A celestial mural is taking shape, part art, part science, part memory. A breeze stirs through the high windows, carrying the scent of saffron and rosewater. The old Persian scholar, the one who first greeted you, leans over and murmurs, "When we teach the stars to speak new languages, they begin to whisper back." You nod, your mind quietly unraveling, wondering what stars will look like in Florence, or Prague, or even further west. But tonight, you remain in Yazd. The moon rises quietly above the city. Someone plays a ney flute nearby, its sound curling through the alleyways like smoke. You lie down on a cool stone bench, hand resting on your scroll case, and close your eyes beneath a sky now filled with shared stars. Whispers in Venetian wind. The sails flutter softly above your head, catching the light Mediterranean breeze like paper kites adrift in a daydream. You're on a slim galley slipping into the Venetian lagoon, its oars silent in the early dusk. The sun sets behind the domes of Santa Maria della Salute, and Venice, that strange floating city, begins to shimmer. Half reflection, half architecture. You step off the boat and into a world where everything feels borrowed from somewhere else. Arabic arches blend with Roman columns. Greek statues peek from Byzantine facades. And now, in this alternate path of time, something new has arrived: Korean star charts. They move quietly through the city, in velvet-lined cases passed between scholarly hands. In whispers through the narrow stone alleys. In curious glances exchanged at the markets. Your guide, a middle-aged Venetian with tobacco-stained fingers and ink smudged into his cuffs, leads you through a maze of bridges and piazzas to a small building beside a canal, a private study rented by one of Venice's lesser-known nobili. Inside, the air smells of lavender and candle wax. On the desk are several items that seem out of place: a lacquered Korean inkstone, a worn translation of Yi Cheon's astronomical treatise, and, curiously, a half-finished painting of the night sky where Ursa Major appears with annotations in both Hangul and Latin. The nobleman, a soft-spoken man in silk slippers, gestures to a globe in the corner. It's not of Earth, but the heavens, marked with constellations in unfamiliar configurations. You recognize them immediately. Someone has copied the Korean maps. And not badly. He speaks in measured tones. Your scholars see things we do not. Patterns in the stars we thought were random. He points to Orion's belt, where a small notation reads Gamsung, the sentinels. Beside it, a note in Latin: Custodes Ignati, the unknown watchman. The Venetian leans closer. We always thought them hunters. But now, I wonder, guards of what? You step out onto the balcony, where gondolas drift quietly past in the canal below. A soft bell rings in the distance. Somewhere, someone is tuning a violin. The conversation inside turns to telescopes, still in their infancy. One scholar pulls out a spyglass imported from the Low Countries. He hands it to you and gestures upward. The moon, he says. She waits. You raise the glass to your eye. The moon's surface swims into view, cratered, pockmarked, impossibly textured, nothing like the jade-smooth orb painted on Korean scrolls. And yet, familiar. A historical truth worth pausing on, though Europe often gets credit for the telescope. Early experiments with optical lenses existed in many cultures, including Korea and China. What if, in this alternate world, their knowledge converged earlier? Back inside, a slow, deliberate debate unfolds. One Venetian scholar insists that the heavens are divine, unchanging, eternal, perfect. A Korean monk counters. But what if perfection includes movement? A quiet pause. The nobleman smiles. Perhaps both can be true. Later that evening, you walk the Mercery, Venice's narrow shopping street, now empty except for flickering lanterns and the scent of rain-soaked stone. You pass a bookstore window where two books lie side by side, one bound in Italian leather, the other wrapped in soft blue silk. Both are titled simply, The Stars. Some scholars still argue whether East and West ever truly met in the Renaissance, whether knowledge flowed both ways, or if Europe simply absorbed and repackaged. But in this softened history, the interaction feels like translation. Careful, respectful, even poetic. You spend the night in a guest room above the study. The window is cracked open, letting in the sound of water lapping at stone, and the distant creak of wood on canal. Lying there in the half-dark, you notice a small object hanging above the bed. A wooden taeguk, the yin-yang symbol, carved delicately and set into a compass rose. You trace it with your finger and smile. Somewhere far to the east, your homeland still watches the same stars. And now, so does Venice. In the library of the Medici, the morning is warm and dry as you travel inland, leaving behind the shimmer of Venice for the dusty golden hills of Tuscany. Cypress trees line the road like silent watchmen, and the air smells of lavender, parchment, and baked stone. You ride in the back of a cart now shared with crates of astronomical manuscripts and a strangely cheerful Florentine scribe who hums as he sharpens quills. He gestures often, describing, in a mix of Italian and badly pronounced Korean, the marvel that awaits you in Florence, the private collection of the Medici family. When you arrive, the city glows amber in the early light, with red-tiled roofs and painted walls. Bells chime from the Duomo, echoing through narrow alleyways filled with the scent of fresh bread and wet plaster. The Medici villa sits at the edge of the city, overlooking vineyards and olive groves. Its arches and gardens reflect a world obsessed with proportion and harmony, an ideal that, surprisingly, resonates with the Confucian scholars in your group. You're led inside through cool stone corridors to a vast room where sunlight falls across long tables stacked with manuscripts, celestial globes, and mechanical devices. This is not a public library. This is a sanctuary of elite knowledge, guarded, but not sealed. At the head of the room stands a man with a fur-lined cloak and soft, weathered eyes. Giovanni de' Medici, cousin to the better-known Lorenzo, and, in this reality, a quiet patron of unconventional science. He greets you in Latin, then switches to hesitant Chinese, then bows and gestures politely for you to sit. I have read fragments, he says slowly, from the Eastern courts. You read the sky with silk and patience. He pauses, lifting a brass device. We prefer gears. He shows you a clockwork model of the solar system, based on Ptolemaic theory. You recognize the errors immediately. Earth at the center, the sun spinning in circles. A Korean scholar next to you carefully unfurls a scroll that shows the moon's elliptical path. Giovanni leans in, eyebrows raised. Ellipses? The dialogue begins. For the next several days, you assist in translating documents. A Jesuit-trained Italian scholar deciphers Hangul. A Korean astronomer rewrites formulas in abacus notation. The Medici's artisan engraver begins sketching new astrolabe designs that fuse Western brasswork with Korean shadow casting theory. A real historical detail, while the heliocentric model wouldn't fully catch on for another century. Certain Renaissance thinkers flirted with alternate cosmologies. Some historians even believe Leonardo da Vinci entertained the idea of Earth's movement. In this alternate world, that spark is lit earlier, not by Copernicus, but by a quiet comparison of calendars and moon tables. Giovanni shows you his prized possession, a Codex of Ptolemy, annotated with Greek and Arabic notes. You gently place beside it a scroll copied from Cheonsong Yolcha Banyajido, the Korean, celestial chart of the constellations. When the two are aligned, you notice something odd. Both maps include a misplaced star, one off by nearly 2 degrees. The room falls silent. An open question forms, heavy in the air. Were both sides wrong? Or was something else happening in the heavens? The Medici patron calls in a painter that evening, not to capture portraits, but to begin charting a hybrid celestial map. You watch as the stars are drawn anew, with lines that dance between cultures, between hemispheres. Between centuries. In the evenings, you dine under ivy-draped trellises with the household. Conversations drift between mathematics, art, and seasonal winds. A Florentine servant quietly asks if it's true that Korean astronomers used fire and water to measure time. You smile and describe the Jagyongnu, the self-striking water clock of King Sejong's court. Eyes widen. Some argue, even now, whether Florence was truly open to non-European knowledge. But in this quiet retelling, curiosity outweighs pride. Here, the Renaissance is not just a revival of the ancient West, but a convergence of forgotten and distant insight. Before you leave, Giovanni gives you a gift, a handmade astrolabe inscribed in both Latin and Hangul. "We have changed each other," he says quietly, not loudly, but permanently. You step out into the soft evening air. The hills ripple gold in the fading light. Fireflies begin to blink along the hedgerows. In the distance, someone plays a lute. You lean back on a stone wall and look up. The stars twinkle as if aware of their growing fame. And just for a moment, you imagine Galileo, still a boy in Pisa, gazing at the same night sky, not knowing that one day, his telescope might carry the whispers of Korean skies into Italian thought. An Ottoman invitation. Your journey continues southward, along roads that trace the curve of the Apennines, then sweep eastward toward the Adriatic coast. Breezes off the sea bring scents of salt, crushed mint, and distant spices. You travel quietly, with a smaller entourage now, only one Korean scholar, a Venetian intermediary, and a letter sealed in golden ink. The letter bears the Tura, the official calligraphic signature of Sultan Bayezid II. How the invitation reached Florence remains a mystery. Some whisper it came through diplomatic circles in Ragusa. Others suggest a Persian trader saw your scrolls and recognized astronomical symbols from ancient Islamic texts. Whatever the case, the Ottomans have asked to meet. You board a wide merchant vessel with high sails and smooth oars. The sea is kind. Days pass in a haze of warm light, creaking wood, and waves that slap gently against the hull. Each night, you lie on deck beneath a canopy of stars that seem more familiar now, labeled with both Arabic and Korean names in your dreams. You disembark in Istanbul, or rather, Constantini, as the locals still call it in this version of time. The city spills over 7 hills, its skyline pricked with minarets and domes. The call to prayer floats in the air like mist, and pigeons circle above ancient walls built by emperors long gone. You're escorted not to the palace, but to the Madrasa of Bayezid, an institution of higher learning that blends Greek logic, Arabic astronomy, and Turkish curiosity. The scholars here wear flowing robes and speak in precise, lyrical Turkish. Your interpreter helps, but the true language in this place is geometry. You are ushered into a vaulted chamber filled with books in Arabic, Persian, and Syriac. Hanging from the ceiling are intricate armillary spheres, designed centuries earlier by Muslim astronomers who calculated the movements of planets without ever seeing them. A real historical fact, the Meregay Observatory, built in 1259 in Persia, developed advanced models of planetary motion centuries before Copernicus. Some historians argue that these ideas were passed westward through translations. But here, in this alternate flow, the Korean star mapping techniques offer something new: latitude-specific calibration. Tied not just to stars, but to seasonal humidity and cloud cover. You are introduced to Nasser Effendi, a senior astronomer with ink-stained fingers and a slight cough. He smiles when shown a Korean Hanchanui, a spherical star chart mechanism. "We have its cousin," he says, pointing to a brass sphere with interlocking rings. "But yours knows when to be patient. Ours never stops moving." For the next few days, dialogue flows easily. You trade diagrams of eclipses, compare lunar calendars, and debate the best methods for predicting solar transit across different latitudes. A Persian scholar brings out a weathered copy of Al-Tusi's planetary models. Your Korean companion adds corrections based on cloud pattern studies from Jeju Island. One night, in the tiled courtyard, you watch as 2 students build a hybrid sundial, one face inscribed in Arabic, the other in Hangul. The shadow of the gnomon falls across both systems, proving them in harmony. You share meals of rice, spiced lamb, pickled vegetables, and rosewater cakes. The Ottomans are generous, inquisitive, and occasionally skeptical. One young scholar challenges you. Do your stars sing? When you answer no, he chuckles. Ours hum, at least in poetry. A quirky detail. One scholar presents you with a small, curved tube made of polished brass and claims it can amplify moonlight. It doesn't work, but the intent sparks an idea. What if, instead of capturing sound, one could magnify light? You tuck the thought away. The debate turns philosophical. A group gathers to compare celestial metaphors. In Korea, the stars guide morality. In the Ottoman tradition, they reflect divine order. A Greek-speaking monk joins in, suggesting that stars are neither tools nor symbols, but simply questions made visible. Some historians today argue that the Ottomans were resistant to foreign ideas during Bayezid's reign. Others, however, note his support for scholars fleeing the Spanish Inquisition and his generous funding of libraries. In this world, those doors are open just enough. Before you leave, Nasser Effendi gifts you a bound codex. Inside are prayers, predictions, and poetic interpretations of eclipses written in elegant calligraphy. Not all knowledge is useful, he says with a wink, but all of it is beautiful. You walk that evening along the Galata Bridge, watching boats drift across the Bosphorus. The water glows faintly with moonlight. Somewhere behind you, a minaret lights up like a candle. And above, high above, Orion rises. Just like he did over Florence. Just like he did over Seoul. You wonder, if so many people map the same sky in different ways, what else might we be misreading together? A star map returns home. The Galata winds have barely faded from your coat before your thoughts turn eastward, not just back to Korea, but to something older, more ancient. A question has begun to form. Soft as fog, persistent as dew. What did the sky look like before we divided it into names? You travel by caravan now. The journey from Istanbul to Samarkand is long, but deliberate. Along the old Silk Road, the sky becomes your compass. Each village and oasis seems built around wells, not just for water, but for reflection. Nights bring clear horizons, and with them, an intimacy with constellations that seems somehow closer the farther you drift from empire. At a dusty trading post in Herat, you meet a bookseller who carries manuscripts wrapped in wool and saffron. Among them is a fragment of a celestial map from the Tang dynasty, annotated in Arabic and smudged with Mongol fingerprints. This passed through many hands, he says. Some say it was once used to guide a caravan by moonlight alone. You sit with that idea. Moonlight as compass, starlight as inheritance. You sleep that night under open sky. No roof, no walls, just the hush of wind over sand and the crackle of a distant fire. Your Korean companion reads quietly from your shared journal, revising calculations you both made months earlier in Venice. Now they seem different, almost naive. Perhaps the stars aren't fixed. You think, perhaps it's our understanding that drifts. A real historical fact. Uyghur astronomers in the 9th century built complex systems of star classification and calendar design, integrating Persian, Chinese, and Indian influences. Their sky charts featured names no longer used, representing a lost taxonomy of the heavens. Some historians argue that these knowledge systems were decentralized, resistant to empire, but vulnerable to forgetfulness. Others suggest they formed a flexible cosmology, one that welcomed adaptation rather than demanding control. In Samarkand, the city gleams like a sapphire set in the sand. Blue tiles catch sunlight at impossible angles, and the Ula Beg Observatory waits like a slumbering lion. It is quiet here. The observatory is no longer in operation, but its massive sextant, carved directly into stone, remains. You step down into the trench where astronomers once traced planetary movements with exquisite precision. Your footsteps echo. Dust shivers. Ula Beg, a prince and scientist of the 15th century, created one of the most accurate star catalogues of his time, rivaling even those in Renaissance Europe. He was assassinated, some say, for caring more about stars than power. Your Korean guide lights a lantern, and you both begin charting a hybrid star map, laying Korean constellations atop the positions measured here centuries earlier. Some match, others don't. In the spaces where names diverge, meaning blooms. A quirky detail. A tile mosaic at the observatory's entrance shows a mythical creature with 3 eyes and 6 wings, labeled Guardian of the Polar Star. Your guide recognizes the creature from Korean folklore, though their It is called Chilsung Ui Saja, the Lion of the Seven Stars. You leave a copy of your chart hidden beneath the lintel of the old observatory. Folded in waxed cloth. No one may find it. That's not the point. The act of leaving it behind is enough, a breadcrumb in time. A whisper to future stargazers. You travel onward, eastward still, through mountains that scrape the sky and valleys where cloud banks hang low like drifting sheep. Somewhere near Karakoram, you camp alongside a group of Tibetan pilgrims. They sing softly to the stars. Names unfamiliar to you, but the patterns familiar. Your dreams are different now. You see stars without lines, constellations as music, the sky as a dance, not a diagram. A slow realization creeps in. Perhaps naming the stars is less about ownership and more about belonging. One night, at a mountain pass too narrow for wagons, your guide turns and says, "Do you remember the Venetian clock tower?" You nod. That bell tower measured time. He continues, "But this," and he gestures upward to a sky dusted with stars, "this measures awe." And you understand what he means. Not everything needs to be useful. Not every chart needs a destination. Some historians still argue whether Ulugh Beg's catalogue influenced later European models. Others suggest it was simply forgotten, buried beneath empire and erosion. But in this quiet alternate world, the echo remains. As you descend the final slope toward the Yellow River Basin, you begin to feel the weight of your journey. Not a burden, more like a fullness. You have traced a path not just across land, but across interpretation. You are not returning home. You are returning forward. And the stars, once symbols of distance, now seem to illuminate a closeness that wasn't there before. Joseon under the telescope. You return to Hansung, modern-day Seoul, beneath a gray sky and the soft crunch of autumn leaves. Your boots are worn. Your notebook's fatter than when you left. But it's not the paper that's grown heavier, it's the ideas. The stars now live behind your eyes, glowing faintly whenever you pause to look up. You arrive just as a new observatory is being completed at the Royal Academy. It's modest by European or Central Asian standards, no great towers or massive sextants. But the heart of it is new, a refracting telescope. Handcrafted from bronze, brass, and lenses sourced through Dutch-Japanese trade. The Silic scholars, practical Confucians focused on empirical study, invite you to demonstrate it. You align the lens, make tiny adjustments to its housing. Then you step aside as the scholars take turns peering skyward. Each gasp is a small revolution. One of them cries out in delight, "I can see the moons of Jupiter." Another, more cautious, notes the movement of Saturn's rings. And your guide, now no longer just a translator but your full partner, scribbles new annotations into a Korean star atlas. A real historical fact. The Joseon dynasty did indeed develop extensive star charts. Most notably the Cheonsong Yolcha Banyajido, a celestial map carved in stone in 1395. It depicted over 1.400 stars and used traditional Korean constellations, differing from Chinese and Western mappings. But now, in this softened history, you watch as those ancient constellations slowly begin to shift, not replaced, but enriched. Western astronomy is not forced upon Joseon, rather, it is received gently, like adding spice to an already flavorful broth. And yet, the blending is not seamless. An older scholar scoffs at the telescope. "We chart the stars with philosophy," he says, "not with foreign glass." A young student quietly mutters, "But the moons, they're real." A debate simmers. Is seeing believing? Or does understanding come not from vision, but from context? You leave the room as the conversation continues, preferring the cool hush of evening. Outside, the new star chart is being painted on a tall scroll. You recognize the Big Dipper, though in Korean it's known as Bukdahilsung, the 7 stars of the northern ladle. Your companion adds a small, faint line connecting it to an unnamed star. "We saw it near Samarkand," they whisper. It felt important. A quirky detail. One of the students makes a mistake and paints a small star with a bright red dot. Instead of correcting it, the teachers decide to leave it in. They call it the Lost Phoenix, and agree it can represent those stars yet to be named. At night, you lie on the wooden porch of the guest house. The smell of pine and rice paper drifting in from inside. A low breeze stirs the edges of the scrolls. The telescope stands alone, silhouetted against the sky. A few children sneak in to look through it, their small hands turning the dials with cautious reverence. Your mind wanders back to Venice, to Samarkand, to the lion mosaic under Ulugh Beg's archway. That creature had wings. Perhaps it flew this far. A soft knock at your door brings you back. It's a messenger from the king's court. Your audience has been granted. You arrive at Gyeongbokgung Palace the next morning, passing under ornate gates and into halls lined with plum wood and silence. The king is younger than you expected, cloaked in midnight blue with an expression more curious than regal. He asks no questions. Instead, he gestures toward a lacquered box. Inside is a golden armillary sphere. Centuries old. My grandfather's, he murmurs. He measured time in harmony with heaven. You are invited to place your hand on it. It's surprisingly warm from the sun. The rings spin gently beneath your palm. You feel time shifting, not just the hour, but the era. You sense this sphere once believed the heavens turned around Earth. But now, it quietly admits, we turn together. Will the stars change us? The king asks softly. You think for a long moment before replying. No, you say, but they might help us remember who we were, before we forgot to look up. He nods, as if that answer has already lived in him for some time. You leave the palace under a sky clearing toward dusk. Your feet feel lighter, though your thoughts are heavier, weightless ideas pulling you into orbit. Some historians argue that Korea's later acceptance of Western science was driven by colonial pressure and resistance alike. Others insist that long before contact, Korean scholars were already building an empirical worldview, only lacking the tools to express it. But in this softened strand of time, the tools have arrived just when curiosity blooms. The telescope is no longer foreign. It is ours, and the sky, still infinite, still mysterious, now begins to speak in a language that belongs to everyone. The scroll makers of Jeolla. You find yourself drifting farther south now, tracing the misty edges of the Jeolla province, where mountains fold like silk over the land and pine forests stretch endlessly toward the horizon. It's quieter here, slower, the kind of place where time forgets to tick. And people don't mind. Your destination lies just past a sleepy village, barely more than a crooked path flanked by persimmon trees. At its end is a modest workshop, its tiled roof sagging under the weight of moss and history. Inside, generations of scroll makers have carefully inked heavenly maps on hanji paper made from mulberry bark. But now, the scrolls are changing. You step through the door, greeted by the scent of ink and dried herbs. A woman with silver-streaked hair nods to you without speaking. She is the master scrollmaker here, and though her hands tremble slightly, her brushstrokes do not. The new scroll she's working on is unlike any you've seen. Instead of just stars and celestial animals, it blends astronomical positions from your notes in Samarkand and Venice with traditional Korean constellations. A twin system. Western epicycles intertwined with the Chilsung stars of Korean lore. Real historical fact. In Joseon Korea, celestial maps were more than scientific, they were spiritual tools. Many believed that the heavens reflected the state of the kingdom, and disturbances in star patterns were omens for earthly change. The concept of Cheonji in heaven-earth-human unity guided everything from governance to planting seasons. Here, that philosophy remains, but it's evolving. The scroll makers debate each evening over cups of omija tea, 5-flavor berry that leaves a sweet-sour aftertaste. Perfect for balancing long discussions. The younger apprentices argue for precision. We must mark even the moons of Jupiter. The elders disagree. Only stars that matter to our stories. They say. You sip quietly, caught between two visions of the sky. A quirky detail. One apprentice, a shy boy named Sang Min, paints miniature constellations of imaginary animals in the margins, creatures he dreams of riding through space. A fox with a comet tail. A whale with lanterns under its fins. No one stops him. In fact, they begin leaving space for his additions. It's a reminder. Not all mapping is about accuracy. Some is about wonder. You are invited to teach a lesson. You sit on a woven mat and open your battered journal, pointing to familiar names. Betelgeuse, Vega, Sirius. The apprentices try pronouncing them, stumbling with soft laughter. Then, they offer their names in return. Beko, the white tiger, Chungryong, the azure dragon. One girl, her hair in a long braid, gently asks, What if we renamed the Western stars with Korean meanings? A long silence follows. It is a bold idea. And yet, no one objects. You spend the afternoon inventing new names. Vega becomes Wa-Nyeo, the Flame Maiden. Sirius is now Dal Nim, the Moon's Herald. Orion's Belt is recast as Gun Ui Washian, the Archer's River. Some historians argue whether it is right to override older astronomical systems. Are we preserving knowledge or reshaping it to suit our stories? But here, by the candlelight and ink, no one seems concerned with those debates. Here, the stars are what you make of them. Outside, the wind whistles softly through cedar branches. Someone has hung finished scrolls from the trees to dry. They flutter gently like sails. You realize you've never seen the sky written in so many voices. As night falls, you lie beneath one of those trees. The stars above glowing faintly through drifting mist. The master scrollmaker comes to sit beside you. "You've brought us a new mirror," she says quietly. "A mirror?" you ask. "Yes," she replies, smiling faintly, "to look back at the stars and see ourselves more clearly." You sleep easily that night, lulled by the rustling paper and the subtle tug of the Milky Way. In your dreams, the fox with the comet tail runs ahead of you, scattering stardust across an infinite scroll. A lighthouse in the night sky. Morning arrives with a hush, not a blaze. The sun filters gently through fog, giving everything the faint hue of old paper and forgotten dreams. You wake beneath a canopy of hanging scrolls, their painted stars still glimmering faintly in the dawn light. Gila has a way of not letting you go quickly, but your path calls again. This time, you travel east, toward the sea. It's a quiet journey, made in the company of reed fields, dragonflies, and an old monk who insists on walking in silence. He carries with him a bronze astrolabe wrapped in silk, engraved with characters neither of you can read. It finds stars when skies are lost. He murmurs once, then says no more. By dusk, the shoreline appears, a soft, rocky coast marked by gentle waves and sea winds perfumed with salt and pine resin. There, perched atop a cliff, is something unexpected. A lighthouse, not for ships, but for scholars. Its light is not fire, but mirrors. As you approach, the structure glints with refracted sunlight, dancing off the curved surfaces of polished bronze plates. Inside, the air is cool and still. No lamps, no scrolls, just a central chamber with a dome overhead, an orrery of spinning rings and angled reflectors, projecting constellations onto the curved ceiling. Real historical fact. Ancient Korea did indeed construct early astronomical observatories. Most famous is Cheomseongdi, built in the 7th century in Silla. It's among the oldest surviving observatories in East Asia, though far simpler than this imagined one. It proves the long-held Korean fascination with stargazing and celestial interpretation. You are now within something inspired by that same tradition, but reshaped by a world where East and West met sooner. The spinning dome takes not just Korean constellations into account, but planetary orbits calculated with Arabic trigonometry, combined with Gregorian star tables adapted by Buddhist monks. Some historians still argue whether such fusion would ever have occurred peacefully. Would Buddhist cosmology clash with Christian astronomy? Would Confucian court scholars reject barbarian logic? But here, in this fictional moment, the tension has eased into quiet curiosity. A quirky detail. The mirror array was built with the help of retired shipbuilders. They knew how to shape convex surfaces from teak and brass. So now, part of the observatory creaks like a boat in the wind. On stormy nights, it rocks ever so slightly. You spend time here, perhaps days. You lose track. Each evening, you help adjust the angles of the great reflectors, following instructions left behind by a long-departed astronomer named Eun-ji. Her notes are scrawled in margins and under floorboards, referencing stars no one else mentions, like the Watcher, a faint flicker just below Ursa Minor, and the Swan's Nest. Hidden behind summer clouds, you find yourself entranced not by the sky, but by how it's seen, and how it's shared. One evening, as the dome darkens, you witness a group of young scholars arriving from distant provinces. They've traveled not to learn, but to contribute, each bringing a new theory, a folk story, or a dream. One suggests that meteors are sky seeds dropped by dragons. Another believes that stars shift not because of gravity, But because of longing, that they move to be closer to one another. You don't correct them, you just listen. That night, the lighthouse does not project the sky. Instead, the dome fills with shadows of animals, shaped by paper cutouts. A lion dances, a carp leaps, a fox curls up to sleep. The scholars laugh, then fall silent. Someone whispers, "Not every light has to lead you home. Some just help you pause." You lie back on a wooden bench, the grain of it worn smooth by centuries of curious hands. Outside, the sea continues its slow, sleepy rhythm. Waves come, waves go. The lighthouse shines on, not bright, but steady, like curiosity, like wonder, like you. Dreams etched in copper and ink. You leave the observatory reluctantly, its gentle mechanism still whirring in your memory. The road ahead draws you northeast, toward the Goryeo-Jurchen frontier, where the mountains thicken and the wind grows crisp and dry. Villages are fewer here, but so are questions. Most people assume you're a wandering scribe, or a slightly lost monk. You smile and let them believe. One morning, you reach a village nestled between two ridges. Its roofs like scattered leaves from above. It's not on any map, but they're expecting you. You're taken to a low building with copper filigree around the door, a former granary, now repurposed into something else entirely, a cross-cultural printing house. Inside, you're met by a young woman with ink-stained fingers and a grin too wide for someone who's been up all night. "We've been working on a book," she says, "but the margins won't behave." You're drawn in immediately. Real historical fact: Korea's Jichi, printed in 1377, is the oldest known extant book printed with movable metal type, preceding Gutenberg's Bible by decades. Though largely forgotten in Western history, it reflects the region's early mastery of printing. But in this imagined world, where Korean kingdoms shared knowledge with Jesuits and Arab scholars earlier than in real history, printing evolved in new directions. Here, you see it firsthand. There are not just movable metal types in Hanja, Hangul, and Latin, but rotating printing drums, repurposed from Chinese war drums and turned into synchronized rollers. They allow continuous text columns, uninterrupted by page breaks. The engineers call it the flow method. A quirky detail: each ink here is flavored, literally, made with fermented herbs, citrus oils, even rose petal dust, so blind printers can tell them apart by taste. You catch a whiff of plum blossom as someone turns a page. The project underway is ambitious. They're compiling not a dictionary, not a treatise, but something called the Atlas of Gentle Inquiries. It's part encyclopedia, part storybook, part dream archive. You hold a draft page in your hands. One column describes how whale migration can be predicted using star charts. Another outlines how candle shadows change shape based on wind direction, a forgotten art from Joseon night watchers. In the corner, a tiny poem in Latin. Truth moves not in straight lines, but in spirals. Some scholars still debate the utility of such hybrid publications. Should factual knowledge mix so freely with allegory? Wasn't the purpose of Enlightenment-era science to refine, not wander? But you feel no conflict here, just invitation. Each printer in the room seems to hum with quiet excitement. Not for fame, not even for posterity, but for the joy of turning thoughts into form, questions into texture, ink into memory. You are invited to leave your own entry. Not a chapter, just a footnote. You hesitate, then dip a brush into citrus-scented ink and write. The stars spoke louder when no one tried to name them. The others don't read it aloud. They just nod, and so the book grows. Before you go, the young woman hands you a folded pamphlet. "We made these for travelers," she says, "in case your dreams get too loud." You open it later by moonlight. Inside are miniature stories, each no more than 4 lines long. Tales of flying kites made of seaweed, of monks who write letters to mountains, of scholars who bury maps in rice fields to see if they grow. They don't, but someone tried, and that matters. Outside, the wind carries the smell of ink and copper and cold. You breathe it in, you keep walking. The road ahead glows faintly, not from lanterns, but from memory, the wind that carries music. As the copper-sweet ink fades from your fingertips, the path winds downward, bringing you toward the coast once more, this time farther north, where sea and land intermingle in tangled marshes and fog-laced harbors. The air here tastes saltier. The wind hums, Not with cold, but with notes. Literal notes. You arrive at a port town whose name no one speaks, only gestures toward. As if sound itself might disturb something sacred. It is a place of musicians and astronomers, of soft conversations and endless tuning. At night, lanterns sway from tall masts, casting shadows that look like moving constellations across the cobbled streets. And everywhere you go, you hear the music, not loud or overwhelming, but drifting, subtle, embedded in daily life. A child plays a reed flute while watching the tides. Two older men tune gongs as they sip plum wine. A woman writes sheet music onto rice paper using a carved cherry blossom twig. Real historical fact. In traditional Korean court music, aak instruments were tuned to cosmological principles. The belief was that harmony on earth reflected harmony in the heavens. Pitches were adjusted not just for aesthetic beauty, but to align with certain celestial patterns. Here in this alternate world, that belief has expanded. The people of this town are perfecting what they call stellar acoustics. It's a gentle science. They map constellations, and then, using algorithms passed down from both Confucian astronomers and Portuguese Jesuits, they translate star positions into musical intervals. The goal? To make the sky sing. A quirky detail. Every fishing boat here has a small flute carved into its bow. When the wind blows right, the vessel plays a note, a signature melody only that boat knows. They call it wind chime sailing. You're invited to an evening concert, but there's no stage, no seating, just townsfolk scattered across rooftops, cliffs, and boats, playing tuned instruments aimed toward the sky. You settle near an old scholar who has brought with him a six-stringed zither made of bamboo and pearl. It's not a concert, he whispers, it's a response. And then, like fireflies blinking into being, the music begins. Each instrument plays not to one another, but to the heavens. Notes respond to the movement of stars, the tilt of the moon, the timing of tides. A violin mimics Jupiter's slow orbit. A hand drum echoes the flickering pulse of Venus. A singer opens her mouth and hums in sync with the Earth's rotation, an audible aum so low it feels more like a heartbeat than a tone. Some historians argue whether this kind of acoustic astronomy ever had true mathematical grounding. Were these pitches genuinely aligned with planetary motion? Or was it, as one 17th-century skeptic wrote, just beautiful nonsense, drenched in incense and dreams? But sitting here now, you feel the sound settle into your skin. You close your eyes, and the line between starlight and melody dissolves. You are no longer listening to the stars. You are inside their chorus. A flute calls out. A gong replies. You hear someone pluck 3 notes on a lyre, then pause, as if awaiting a comet to answer. And far off in the distance, thunder rumbles, not as interruption, but participation. The sky is not silent. It never was. Later, when the last note fades into the tide, the townsfolk quietly return to their homes. No applause, no announcements, just the hush of shared understanding. Before leaving, you visit a small music house by the harbor. On the wall hangs a parchment map, not of constellations, but of musical intervals drifting across sea routes. It shows which tones appear where. There are clusters near the Philippines, minor thirds above Okinawa, a perfect fifth lingering in the waters west of Jeju. You add a note to the corner of the map, as many travelers do. Dorian mode. Just offshore, heard at twilight. No one questions it. As you leave town the next morning, you hear a ship's flute sing your name. Or maybe it's just the wind. The observatory at the world's edge. The sea mists follow you as you journey up the coast and then inland again, to a range of jagged hills that catch the last gold light of day like cracked porcelain. You travel alone now, no caravan, no procession, just you, the crunch of dry leaves underfoot, and a steady pull northward toward what scholars call the last observatory. You reach it by twilight. It's nothing like you imagined, no towering domes or gleaming brass instruments. Instead, the observatory sits half sunken into a cliffside, its roof a platform open to the sky, wrapped in grapevines and lined with ancient pine. Weathered staircases lead downward into chambers carved from volcanic stone, still warm to the touch even in the coldest hours. The caretaker, a woman in robes the color of dusk, greets you without surprise. "We've been expecting you," she says, like it's the most ordinary thing in the world. She leads you to the observation deck. where a ring of scholars, Portuguese, Korean, Arab, even one from the icy steppes of the north, gather around a large bronze armillary sphere. But this one spins slowly, powered not by hand but by a hidden stream of water beneath the floor. A gentle gurgling underscores their quiet conversation. Real historical fact: the Joseon dynasty's Cheomshungdi Observatory in Jeongju is considered the oldest surviving astronomical observatory in East Asia. Built in the 7th century, it was not a telescope tower, but a place to observe stars with the naked eye, an act tied closely to statecraft, agriculture, and ritual timing. This observatory, hidden and imagined, takes that philosophy further. The scholars here are not merely mapping the heavens. They're testing the universe's flexibility. A rare detail: in a sealed chamber beneath the platform, they keep a collection of glass vials, each containing what they call captured starlight. Not literal, of course. Each vial is infused with crushed minerals, oils, and resin carefully timed to collect ambient lunar light during certain alignments. When you hold one close, it glows just enough to cast a shadow of your eyelashes. Tonight, the scholars are attempting something bold. They plan to realign their star mirror, a massive concave disk embedded with polished obsidian shards, to mimic the sky as it appeared 5 centuries ago. During the Great Conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, a way of asking the past a question, one explains. You help them rotate the mirror with a velvet-draped crank. Its slow motion sends light pooling along the stone floor in strange ripples. It feels more like painting time than measuring it. Some historians still argue whether this kind of retro sky mapping ever produced meaningful data. A few claim it was more ritual than research. But in this world, where knowledge and spirituality blend like watercolor, the scholars believe there are answers in ancient light. When the mirror locks into place, the atmosphere changes, the air stills, birds go quiet. You feel an almost imperceptible pull, not gravity, but something softer, like memory, as the scholars chant gently, not in Latin, nor Korean, but something in between. You close your eyes, and you see it, a sky so unfamiliar, it might be someone else's dream. Mars pulses blue, not red, the moon is slivered wrong, Orion leans backward, and yet, it all feels right. You are shown scrolls that document cross-continental sky twins, pairs of observatories that observed the same stars and shared results centuries apart. One story tells of a monk in Seville who saw the same crescent-shaped eclipse as a Confucian astronomer in Hanyang, and they both drew it as a fish leaping through flame. There's an ongoing debate among the scholars here: is time circular? Or is starlight simply layered thickly enough to give the illusion of recurrence? No one agrees. No one needs to. That's not why they're here. In one chamber, you discover a mural. It shows the Earth at night. But from space, a darkened globe painted with pinpricks of gold and ultramarine, showing imagined city lights and constellations overlapping in chaotic harmony. A line of script beneath reads, "If all we see is reflected, perhaps all we know is echoed." You sleep that night on a cushion near the observatory's open dome. Above you, the sky continues its quiet performance. Shooting stars flash, and a strange orange glow pulses near the eastern horizon. Someone whispers that it's not a star, but a planet humming with potential. As you drift, you dream, not of the future, but of all the versions of the past that might have sung differently. If only one note had changed. A ginkgo leaf falls near your cheek as dawn creeps in. And with it, your journey continues. The final map of heaven and earth. You awaken before sunrise, the light still blue and breathless. Like a held note, the observatory behind you is silent, its scholars asleep or deep in meditation. Their instruments at rest. You rise quietly, wrap your robe close, and begin your descent from the hills. A soft wind follows you down winding paths of moss-covered stone. Along the way, you pass markers shaped like celestial animals: the white tiger, the black tortoise, the vermilion bird, symbols from both Chinese and Korean constellations. They seem to nod at you as you pass. Guardians of knowledge long kept secret. You follow a river now. Its surface glimmers faintly as the sky brightens. In its currents, you catch fleeting reflections, not of your face, but of mapped star maps, overlaid with coastlines, trade winds tangled with lunar cycles, cities marked by the constellations they favor. Real historical fact: in both Europe and East Asia. Astronomy wasn't purely observational, it was a matter of state. The movement of planets and stars influenced everything from crop planting to political appointments. Korean astronomers in the Joseon dynasty developed star charts so detailed. They rivaled the best Chinese works, yet remained largely unknown in the West for centuries. A bridge appears, delicate, lacquered in pale blue, with railings carved to resemble braided dragons. You cross it, and on the other side is a small temple, no larger than a garden shed. Inside, a single scroll hangs. The scroll is a map, but not of the world as it is. Or was this a map of how the world has learned? You lean in. It's drawn with ink so fine it looks like strands of silk. Along its surface are strange junctions. One marks the year when a Korean star priest taught trigonometry to a Venetian explorer. Another shows where a monk from Lisbon translated East Asian lunar calendars into astrological poetry. Another shows a small ship, no flag, bearing instruments from Ming engineers and Greco-Roman sailors, bound for the southern skies. The rare detail, on the scroll, the oceans shimmer with flecks of crushed pearl. And above the continents, the sky is drawn in reverse, not the heavens looking down, but looking up, as though the stars themselves are peering into Earth, learning us. You run your fingers across the scroll. It's not labeled by time, only by tone. Some regions are painted in soft pastels, others in sharp, dark inks. You notice that the most vivid places are not the centers of empires, but where cultures blended and boundaries blurred. The ports, the hill towns, the caravan crossroads. A soft chime sounds outside. You step back into the open air. There, waiting beside the river, is a figure in a plain cloak. Their face is shaded by a wide-brimmed hat. You can't tell if they're man or woman, old or young, but they hold something out to you, a compass. Not a standard one, it has no needle. Instead, a tiny disc of silver floats suspended in a circle of water, gently tilting when you shift its base. Etched across its rim are not cardinal directions, but celestial markers. Orion's belt, Draco, the Archer, Cassiopeia. This won't take you home, the figure says softly. It'll take you forward. Some historians argue whether devices like this ever existed, or whether they're just allegory, a metaphor for aligning one's journey with the stars. Not the roads, but here, it's real as the scroll. The wind, the faint warmth of sunrise brushing your hands. You accept it, and as you step away from the river temple, the sun finally breaks the horizon. Not in a blinding flash, but in a slow, golden stretch across the mountains, like a new page being turned. You walk again, not toward the past, not even toward the future, but toward a world where ideas, not borders, define the shape of things. Remember the scholar's words in the palace garden? Every star you name makes the world a little bigger. Now, you know what she meant. And as you walk beneath the now familiar constellations, some Korean, some European, some entirely imagined, you begin to name them quietly to yourself. Not to possess them but to honor the shared gaze that once brought distant worlds together.